First part is really just about getting comfortable and settling all the tension in the body. And then we'll do a short metta practice aimed towards oneself. So find a comfortable seated position. You want to roll forward on your tailbone. And your hands can rest on your knees. You want your spine to be straight. So allow the shoulders to roll back and down. You tuck your chin a bit. You want to feel your back flat but not stiff. You also want to feel like a um, small string is pulling upwards at the crown of the head. So there's this feeling of uprightness. And let's start just by taking a series of very deep breaths, drawing your attention from the environment into the body. Just starting to notice any tension you're holding in the body and allow it to begin to relax with each exhalation. Exaggerate the depth of the inhalation and hold for a moment. And with a long, slow exhalation, just letting go of any tension you're holding in the body. With the next inhalation, bring your attention to the crown of the head. And just breathe there for a moment. Feel your body established here and now. Feel the weight of your body. Body can't be somewhere else. Feeling the weight of your existence in this moment. Allow your attention to fall from the crown of the head forwards to the space between the eyebrows. And just relax this area, relaxing the forehead, the eyebrows, lifting the eyebrows and exhaling, letting them drop down. As you lift the eyebrows, holding the tension up, and as you exhale, letting go. You might scrunch your entire upper half of your face and then let go. Feeling the muscles of your eyes inside their sockets and roll them around, just feeling the musculature. You're not looking, you're not using your eyes to look. Just letting go, relaxing the eyes. Feeling a lightness and a smile around the edges of the eyes. Nothing to figure out. Moving down to the planes of the cheeks, down to the lips, bringing the teeth together, tensing slightly and then releasing, relaxing. Putting and closing your mouth wide, you can roll out your jaw. Pressing your lips together, just allowing the whole jawline to release, relax. Moving down the neck, swallowing a couple times. Feeling this downwards movement down into the shoulders. Raising the shoulders and letting them drop. Let them drop with the exhalation. And the shoulders relax. And with this downward movement, moving down the biceps and triceps, down the elbows, forearms, into the palms and fingers. Just taking a moment to feel the sensations in the hands. Might extend the fingers out and then let them relax. Moving up to the chest. Start to make your attention more subtle. Noticing fabric on the chest and the movement of the rise and fall of the chest and the lungs with each breath. Noticing how the body breathes on its own without any effort. Start to notice the texture of the breath. Is it smooth and round? Is it relaxed? Can you surrender to the breath? Allowing your attention to naturally fall downwards to the abdomen. Feel the weight of the abdomen, stomach, the ribs. Notice the rise and fall, like waves coming in and out. Deeply breathing into the abdomen. With one big inhale, feel the whole front of the upper body rising. Exhale slowly, letting everything go. Feeling everything settle downwards. Moving up to the crown of the head. Let the attention pool there for a moment. And slowly moving from the front of the hairline backwards. Feel every hair follicle, all the muscles throughout the whole scalp moving backwards. Just noticing any sensations, any areas that you can't feel any sensation. Just observing. As you move backwards. Notice if the attention wants to run away or drift and just come back to the body. As you move towards the back of the hairline, start to allow the attention to focus on the back of the neck. From here, let your forehead drop forwards and release any tension in the back of the neck. Let the chin touch the chest. Take one big inhale. And as you exhale, start to roll the neck out. Make 3 circles in one direction and 3 circles in the next. Just mindfully observing any sensations in the neck. Attention to the back of the neck again. Start to move down the back, down the back of the shoulders, shoulder blades, feeling the spine holding you upright. Feel the weight of all the large muscles in the back. As you breathe, observing the wings of the shoulder blades opening and closing. Subtle movements in the back. Moving down to the central region, down into the lumbar. Just taking a moment to feel the whole back. This region of the body we don't see. and to allow your awareness to open to that which you can't see in yourself. It's beneath you or behind you. Starting to develop a 360 panoramic view of the self. Allow your attention to drift down to the waistline. And with a couple breaths, just take in the impression of the whole upper body. Any sensations? Is it hot or cold? Bright or dark? Really working to just bring relaxation to the whole upper body so it feels light and upright and relaxed. Rolling forward slightly on the hip bones so that the spine is straight. Rolling the shoulders back and down. Tucking the chin slightly. Feeling this straight line upwards movement. From here, you can bring your hands into this mudra, the left back of the left hand resting in the right palm, and the two thumbs touching above, and tuck it in beneath your belly button on in your lap. Let them rest in your lap. For a moment, feel the weight of your hands there, centered. Now allow your attention to drift down to the buttocks sitting on the pillow. Feel the contact with the earth. Moving into the thighs. To the knees. Back of the legs. Calves. Feet on the pillow. Feeling your whole lower body heavy, grounded, rooted. Feeling your connection to the earth. How stable and solid and reliable it is. To feel grounded in the body. To feel relaxed. Take a couple deep breaths and allow the whole body to drop downwards, to feel connected to the earth. How the earth holds you up, supports you. Releasing the stomach if there's anything being held there. Relaxing, allowing the stomach to breathe. Relaxing the shoulders, letting go if anything is held there. A deep breath into the shoulders. Relaxing the forehead. From here, your right hand and place it on your heart. Just take a couple breaths and notice the feeling state, your emotional state. You can say internally or out loud, I am safe. Allow this feeling of safety in this moment, in this body, to permeate and saturate every cell in the body, to saturate the nervous system and the mind, the emotional body. If you feel you want to, you can say again, I am safe. Allow your body to feel it. And one last time, may I continue to be safe. One big inhalation, exhale, let go. And saying either quietly or out loud, I am healthy and strong. Allow the feeling to permeate every cell of the body, the emotions and the mind. Inhaling, may I continue to be healthy and strong. Feel the sensation of health, strength saturating every cell in the body. Inhale, and as you exhale, let it go. Inhaling, I am joyful and happy. Feeling this sense of contentment and joy to permeate every cell in the body. Feel a smile at the lips and around the eyes. With your next breath, may I continue to feel joyful and happy. Whole body to relax and receive the feeling. Next breath, either quietly inside or outside, I am peaceful. Allow this feeling of peace to permeate all your thoughts, all your feelings, and allow the body to feel at peace. Let it move through you in waves. There's no pressure and nothing to do. Just be at peace. Bring your hands back to your lap. Feel in your chest a clear white light, radiant, peaceful. Without thinking about them, just breathe the feeling of these intentions into this light. Allow it to expand through the whole body, growing and moving outwards. Feeling the body become translucent and filled with this light, expanding from your center outwards. Until you sense your whole body as a luminous, translucent being. Feel this love for yourself radiating from the center of the light outwards. Deep care for your well-being. Feel that these affirmations are merged with this light. Allow it to radiate throughout your day. Bring your hands to your heart center. Bow to yourself for giving yourself this time. May your practice inform all of your relationships. You're ready, take a couple of deep breaths and begin to come out of the practice. So it's nice at the end of the practice to you can do some massage and bring the heat to your eyes. And you can massage your scalp and your neck and your face. Move through your arms, chest, your back, your legs. And then if you have the time and space, go into a mindful movement practice like yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong. Um, I think I have some Qigong classes I taught on our YouTube channel, maybe. Um, Also, I mentioned last week my Qigong teacher, Yamin, on her website, which was shared in that recent email, teaches an 8 treasures practice, which is a very profound Qigong practice. Uh, Highly recommended. If you want to learn more about that, you can visit her website. Um, okay. So, um, we're talking about relationships as a path of awakening. And today we're talking about the water element. And there's so much one could say about any one of these elements. You know, we could do a whole course just on each element. And one of the great gifts of Taoist and Chinese medicine is, you know, we have thousands of years of refinement of understanding these elements in ourselves and in nature and how they correspond to the organ systems of the body, to the vital fluids, to the blood, to our emotions. And um, really, Taoist medicine is a study of relationships, you know, where Western medicine really studies structure and form. Um, Chinese medicine is rooted in the study of relationships and these phases of change that happens as the relationships interact. And the basis of it is the movement of qi or energy or prana. Um, you know, when qi moves outside of us, there is weather, and when it moves within us, we have our emotions, our emotional experience. And when we talk about the water element, I'm going to talk a little bit about it sort of poetically, and then I want to really spend the short amount of time we have today just talking about it in the context of relationships and personality types. So when we talk about the water element, we're talking about, you know, in the first class, I talked about the cycle of wood to fire to earth to metal to water. And water, of course, is pure yin. It would be considered the feminine. Um, and it's really the container that holds all potential, out of which all form rises. The water element is the threshold between being and becoming. It's the gate between life and death, and between form and formlessness. And because it holds all potential, it's really the container out of which all the other elements come out of. Um, it's the deep ocean of awareness and consciousness out of which all form rises. You know, and as potential in the Tao Te Ching, it opens with this beautiful line that it says, I am the wilderness before the dawn. So there's this image of the wildness of a forest just before everything's awoken. And or another image that's used is a cloud that's pregnant with water but hasn't yet released, or a canvas before the first paint stroke is placed. So it's this realm of pure potentiality that holds all possibility, all potential. As a representative or a metaphor for the feminine, it's the feminine capacity to create life, to hold life within it. Um, it's also another image that's used is an ocean beneath the boat. And when we talk about water, we're really talking about our relationship to fear. And I don't know, sometimes I used to spend my summers up in Canada, Eastern Canada, and when you go out in a boat and you're in this vast ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, and you look over the edge, my experience was this fear of jumping in the water. But I realized at one point studying Chinese medicine, it wasn't the water itself that I was afraid of. It wasn't the ocean itself. It was my fear of the unknown, of what was down there. And this fear of the unknown is really akin to the fear of death, fear of mortality, fear of mystery. And so when we're working with the water element, we're fundamentally working with our relationship to fear. Um, what we fear within ourselves and what we fear in life is what's unknown. It's what's beneath the surface. And in psychological terms, this is the unconscious. Relationship is where our fear of the unknown becomes intimate. So, in relationships that are authentic, there is always a component of fear. And it's the fear of what happens if there's more vulnerability. What happens if you open more deeply? What happens if you stop defending or defining? What happens in this space of the unknown, of the presence between two people when they let go of all of their egoic defense mechanisms? Ultimately in relationship, we're seeking to merge. Um, and the kind of irony or the paradox is that we're not separate to begin with. And this is why relationships are mirrors, right? They can show us all the areas of contraction and fear within us, which are very hard to see on our own. So water represents safety, survival, depth, continuity, and endurance. If you think about water element as the wintertime, in the wintertime, we need resources. When we lived in a more agrarian age for many thousands of years, millions of years, no, thousands of years, um, for the last 300,000 years, between 2 and 300,000 years, wintertime was a time that elicited a lot of fear because if you didn't have enough resources through the winter, people died. And so this notion of survival and safety and depth is very important. And the water element governs the unconscious and emotional storage, survival instincts, and our relationship to the unknown. How do we relate to the unknown? It's not emotion itself, water. Oftentimes in Western, when we talk about the Western four elements, we talk about water being the emotions, right? As opposed to thought or something. And it's not actually emotions, it's the container that allows emotions to exist without overwhelming the system. So, one of the reasons water is likened to emotions is because it flows, and our emotions flow, right? They're constantly changing. One minute you're happy, the next minute you're sad, one minute you're open, and the next minute you are in a fight or flight response or fearful. Our emotions move very fast and they then inform our nervous systems. And this is very important in relationships. So, water is yin and receptive, and it has to do with listening and non doing. So, the water corresponds to the kidneys, right, which govern fluids and water in the body. But because water is receptive and it's reflective like a lake, it reflects the reality around it and it corresponds to our hearing because hearing is receptive. Of course, you can actively listen to things, but of all the senses, of all the sense organs, hearing is considered the most receptive. And one of the fastest pathways into mindfulness, into meditation in action, so to speak, is just to listen. There's always sound happening in the field, right? So if we attune our hearing, it immediately brings you into the meditative state. Of all the senses, hearing is one of the most effective pathways into mindfulness. Water is about holding potential instead of expression. When we get into the wood element and fire, we're going to talk about outwards expression a lot more. Where other elements move and refine and connect and nourish, water waits and it stores and it remembers. It's very deep. People who have a water element makeup are deep humans. They tend to be the artists or the philosophers or the sages. And oftentimes they're more prone to depression because if you stay in the deep too long, sometimes you live in the deep for so long or you go so deep into that realm of the unconscious, the emotions, it's hard then to connect, to relate to others. You're seeing a reality that other people often don't see. And there can be a feeling of inertia or not enough spark to move or to express or to move outwards. So water, when it becomes pathological, tends towards inertia and depression. When it's healthy, it tends towards depth and insight and wisdom. Wisdom arises when when your nervous system learns that that it can rest with life as it is. So we live in a culture that doesn't really understand the importance of rest. And oftentimes we have a hard time resting because we're feeling the constant pressure towards productivity. And this introjected or internalized conditioned belief that you're meant to always be productive, producing, creating, self-monitoring, etc., disallows us from dropping into these aspects of the unconscious where we're holding beliefs that are repressing energy from flowing freely in the body. And so, again, wisdom arises when when the nervous system learns it can rest with life as it is, can be at peace with non-doing. Fear arises when safety is uncertain. So when we work with the water element in winter, we're really working with uncertainty, the unknown, and we're working with opening up a creative relationship to the unconscious. What beliefs as children did we internalize when something traumatic happened? And again, it might not be overt or intense trauma, but we all experience some form of trauma. What belief did we form? What question? How did we internalize that trauma to mean something about us? What did it mean about reality being safe? What did it mean about what we think about other people, how we see other people? And how did those beliefs become unconscious and then inform our relationship to uncertainty and safety? Because those are the foundations of where fear comes from in the body. And if fear is constant and consistent, our nervous system can't establish a baseline in the parasympathetic nervous system and be rested enough for that fear to transform into wisdom. So people who work deeply with the water element tend to be wise. They're our sages, right? And if you think about somebody in your life who you believe is wise, you find them to be wise. What is the characteristic about them that sort of defines that wisdom? Now, there's many different types of wisdom, right? But one of them is our relationship to emptiness, to the unknown. There's something about wisdom that has to do with being at peace with the unknown, being at peace with emptiness, right? There's a certain relaxation into the mystery. This is a very water element quality. So I want to talk about how water elements love. So if your partner or your friend or your boss or whomever is a water element type, or you are a water element type, um, this might be helpful in understanding how you love and how you receive love and how you give love and all of that. Water loves more through continuity than intensity. So intensity is more a wood and fire element quality, right? Water is about endurance and long-term commitment and loyalty. It loves through presence. Presence during difficulty instead of needing to process everything all the time, or engage, or connect, or grow, or create a plan. It's about presence and loyalty and endurance. And it's really about deep listening rather than fixing or persuading. So deep listening, a water type loves through deep listening. And for other people, that might be hard to understand because they feel something has to be done. Whereas water loves through receptivity. It's a receptive element. It's the most receptive element. And so for other elemental types, sometimes this is confusing and difficult to make sense of, right? How can love be passive, kind of thing? So water bonds through continuity, not through chemistry. It wants to feel safe. So safety and depth, loyalty, continuity, presence, these are what create a field of openness and love for a water type. It's not through chemistry and intensity and engagement and connection, right? The connection's very deep, but it's not intense. So water doesn't rush, it remembers. Um, it is this depth that holds. It's a container. All right. There's a lot more material I wanted to cover here, but we've got it's 8:59. So I'm going to talk about one more thing and then I will stay on for another probably 10 minutes to finish. If you can't stay for the 10 minutes, the recording will be available and you can watch the part that you missed if you'd like. So I want to talk a little bit about elemental misattunements in relationship. This is about language and not intentions. So, water types do not like being diagnosed. They don't want to be assessed. They don't want to be pressured or scrutinized, right? Waters have to be able to flow. And depth is slow, it takes time, right? Each of the elements has its own relational language. And, water loves through loyalty and depth. This is what creates that relational connection. Whereas as you move into wood's about direction and growth. So wood types, they want to grow, they want to feel that there's growth happening, that they are moving in a direction. There has to be purpose, right? Whereas fire types, they love through presence and shared feeling and connection. Fires are the sparks, right? They're the social butterflies. They want intensity, they want sexuality, they want connection, they want intimacy. That can feel like pressure and overwhelm to a water type. For earth types, they care about care and reliability and nourishment and reciprocity, right? Earth types are about stability. And generally, earth types and water types get along very well because earth types can create a container. The earths contain water. You know, if water is always flowing everywhere, for it to feel contained with metal or held with earth, that feels very supportive to a water type. Metals love through clarity and boundaries, right? Metals want integrity and order and clarity and to know what's going on. And so oftentimes metal types can have healthy relationships with water types as well, because they can create a container for the water, right? Now the issue with metal and water in terms of relational dynamics is it can be cold, it can be very reserved, and it can create for inertia, right? So some of the warmth of earth, some of the warmth of fire, as long as it's not too much, can bring some movement to the metal and water that allows for nourishment. Now, conflict tends to often arises in partnership or in relationships, not because the partners don't care, but because they speak a different elemental language. And this can be so helpful when you start to get a little better sense of your own elemental makeup and your partners, then, or the people you're working with, you know, it can be in any relational dynamic. You start to realize this isn't about not caring, it's about speaking different languages, right? People hear each other differently. You know, the care may be sincere, but the language is wrong. So common misattunements are giving water a sense of urgency instead of time. Waters are deep, so they need time to process things. So they don't want a sense of urgency. With fire, giving fire solutions instead of presence. Fire types just want you to be present with them and to connect. They don't want solutions. They don't want rationality. They want emotional connection. Earth types want reassurance instead of appreciation. So for Earth people, you know, we see a lot of Earth types, for example, in anxious attachment relationships. They want reassurance. They just want to be told in the moment everything's okay, um, instead of being appreciated. So metals want giving metals emotion instead of clarity is a misattunement. Metal types want clarity. They want to know what's going on. They oftentimes are highly intellectual people. They want to understand the situation. They don't want the emotional intensity of a situation, or they don't respond to it as well. It's not their language. Um, Giving wood types comfort instead of direction does not get you very far. Wood types want to grow, right? We talked about the tree in the first class. So wood types need directionality. They need to know, where is this going? What's the plan? Comforting them doesn't land, it doesn't resonate. So one thing I want to say about earth types is I mixed it up. What earth types want is appreciation. They don't want reassurance. They don't need reassurance. Earth types are all about care and nourishment and giving and receiving. I talked about the Earth Mama, right? Like the one in the kitchen, making sure everybody's taken care of. Sometimes they overgive such that they fail to nourish themselves. What Earth types want is just to be appreciated. That's how, and for their care to be felt. That's how it lands. So, I want to talk a little bit about shadow, where the shadow shows up with water types. You know, we talked in the beginning about fear and survival, and going into fear and allowing it to transform into wisdom, and survival in the winter as almost like a biological, evolutionary need, right? This being resourced. Water types, to feel safe, need to feel like they're well resourced. They're supported. They have what they need, right? Now, these patterns are nervous system intelligence, right? For water types, that feeling of safety is so important. Being able, allowing the nervous system to be in a rested state. And so where the shadow material shows up is when the nervous system doesn't feel safe and rested. When trust is injured, trust is very important to water. Very important. When trust is injured, water shifts into survival strategies, water types. These aren't character flaws. They're nervous system adaptations, right? So when water is in excess, and I can speak more to this if we have time, but when water is in excess, it goes into conservation mode and it withdraws. So water types, if they're feeling overwhelmed with emotion or with life, they tend to withdraw, and it's not a form of avoidance, which is what a lot of other types might experience it as. It's actually a form of conservation and protection. Their system is saying, I do not trust replenishment. So they're feeling like they're unable to replenish and they tend to withdraw to conserve energy. Now, what this looks like in terms of like ideas or language, and if you're a water type, you might see this in yourself, or you might know people who you might have heard them say this. The feeling is, I want to disappear. I feel overwhelmed, but frozen, right? Water can be very cold, right, in yin. Everything feels heavy. This is in the body, right? I am safe only when I withdraw. So this to a wood type, this is perceived maybe as like laziness, but it's not laziness, it's the system conserving energy. So water types often need a lot of space and time to process the depth of feeling and experience they have. But if it's in excess, they can get stuck in that frozen or that heavy or that overwhelmed mode, right? So we have to bring it back into balance. Now, when water is in deficient, instead of going into conservation, it goes into a hyper-vigilant mode. And this is the system running on willpower instead of trust. So it's when trust has started to break down and they start to run on willpower. So willpower is the fundamental energy of the kidneys, of the Jing, of the water element. And willpower is the ability to do things, but there's a difference between hustle or doing things because you have to versus doing things from a place of alignment. And so in this deficient mode, it's I can't fully relax. I'm tired, but I can't stop. I feel on edge. I have to hold everything together. Those are the feelings. In both deficiency and excess, the body has learned that rest is unsafe. So rest, the ability to rest deeply is so essential to replenishing water element energy. Um, okay, I'm gonna say one last thing for 1 minute. Sorry, I'm so long-winded, but this material, I try to get through it as quick as I can. And this is kind of the heart of what I want to share about the water element. And this is the working with the water element as a spiritual path as part of relational cultivation. Um, Water teaches us awakening through non-doing, through not doing anything. It is the power of letting go, and it's the power of surrender. As one of my teachers, I lived with this Swami like 20 years ago, and he always said, it's precisely the thing that you think you can't let go of that you must. Um, this is part of wisdom. Our deep, wise, intuitive selves know the things that we have to let go of. It's usually one big thing, you know. And we can't rest truly and deeply until we let that thing go. And it can even just be a belief, you know? So wisdom is not the absence of fear. It's the knowledge of emptiness. It's the recognition that fear is not the self. We spend so much of our lives caught in fear and reacting to it at deep, deep levels of unconscious mind. And this, we're going to talk more about shadow work in the Metal Element course. As identification with fear diminishes, ease in the face of the unknown starts to emerge. So learning to disidentify from our fear is foundational to this spiritual work. And fear is so present in most relationships. You know, I've definitely experienced it in all my relationships. And we have to ask ourselves, what am I afraid of here? What am I afraid of? You know, it's a simple question, but the answer can be quite deep. So finally, meditation is the water practice. So in each of the 5 elements, we're going to talk about what practice is central. Meditation is the cultivation of a relationship to emptiness. In emptiness is a dimension of the self. It's the ground of being where you have no problems. There's no story. There's no biographical self. There's no trauma. There's no abuse. And it's before identity. So learning to identify with emptiness within the self is the path to relinquishing identification with fear as part of who you are. And the path of meditation, the practice of meditation, is developing a relationship to emptiness that is non-conceptual. It's a lived experience, such that when fear arises in the body and you realize you're contracting or protecting or avoiding or doing whatever it is that we do in the face of fear, learning to exhale, to let go, and to come back to this realm of emptiness within the self that is free of a problem, free of fear, free of the trauma, and that we can rest in that space as part of foundationally who we are, beyond fear. And that's the doorway into wisdom. So, water awakens not by conquering fear, but by learning to no longer identify with it. And, you know, Chogyam Trungpa talked a lot about this in and Shambhala and the Path of the Warrior, Don Juan, you know, and a lot of the teachings of Don Juan. Um, uh, I'm forgetting the name of the book, Journeys to Ixtatlan. Um, um, you know, this path, working with fear is really foundational to this work, and it's specifically within the water element. So when we work with the 5 elements through the seasons, in the wintertime, we tend to do water element work and ask questions about fear and that kind of thing. So this week, I'm going to send out some questions that you can work with. And I might send out my final thoughts that I didn't share today. But one question I want to leave you with. Where am I postponing integrity in the name of safety? Ultimately, this work is work towards higher levels of wholesomeness and integrity. You cannot be walking a spiritual path and be out of integrity. Full stop. So our capacity to love in relationships deepens when we stop asking, why are you like this about other people? And we start asking, what is your element trying to protect? What are you trying to protect? What are you protecting? And asking yourself, what am I protecting? And when I protect that thing, am I out of integrity? Right? Um, okay, I think we covered the big things at least that I wanted to. So I'm going to send out some questions this week, and I'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody wants to ask questions. Thanks for bearing with me for an extra 15 minutes. And thanks everybody for coming this morning. Yes, you can send an email with a question after this call, no problem. I'll drink some highly oversteeped tea here.
Colin, would you please repeat what you just said, that your thought for the week?
Oh, the question?
The question, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, where am I postponing integrity in the name of safety?
Colin, there's a question from Aaron that said, I scored half and half between two elements. Which is my primary?
Um, it depends. What I would look at is where you default under stress, meaning how do you respond? Here's a way to do this. Think about a stressful situation or a crisis or the last time you were dealing with something that was very difficult and look at how you responded to that situation and kind of write it out. Generally speaking, that response is your subtype. Whereas your dominant element is how you show up in life when you're at ease, when life is not overwhelming you. In every class, I'm going to share more resources as we move along because there's a lot of great books on the elements. No, there are a lot of bad books on the elements, and there are some good books on the elements. Um, but as you become more and more familiar with the elements, you want them to become so familiar that you just see them naturally kind of occurring around you all the time and in people, and you develop a non-abstract relationship to them. But right now, knowing, okay, I kind of have these two more dominant types is helpful. But rather than trying to assess, I would try to just observe. Meaning there's nothing to do. It's really about like, can I just start to see it more? So for this coming week, try to work with the water element based on how I've kind of described it, and I'll share a couple more little notes in the email, and try to just work with seeing it, right? What is your relationship to the unknown? How often do you feel comfortable with trust? What is your relationship to trust? Um, what is your relationship to meditation? Do you avoid meditation, and is it because of material that arises in meditation? Um, a strong meditation practice will begin to open up your relationship to the unconscious. And most of our sort of, I don't want to call it dysfunctionality, but imbalances come because of unconscious beliefs that we've repressed and suppressed and pushed down into the unconscious. So we're going to talk more about that kind of throughout the next 5 classes. Um, I did a course on shadow work, I think a year ago or something, and I might look and see if there are some additional resources in terms of some of these classes as we work through the material. But really, this course, you can't cover this material. This is just to start to get familiar with the elements and to start to see it a little more in yourself. And then, this work is a lifetime. It's years of going through the seasons, starting to observe the elements in each season and in ourselves. It's not something to figure out like today and then apply it to your relationships and think that it's resolved. It's a path, this is a lifelong path. And it's really Taoist cultivation. And there's a lot of material here. There's many, there's a lifetime of work that could be done through the 5 element path. All right. And actually, I'll share a little chart that could help you sort of see your dominant and your sub type in the email.
I have a question about the questionnaire.
A question about the question? Okay.
About the questionnaire.
Yeah.
Um, so in the question 6, 7 that were about the subtype, was it expected for those to be a different element, like one being an excess and one being deficient?
Not necessarily. I've got a, I don't have it in front of me, but subtypes. Okay, here's what I want to say about this generally. The five element system is holographic. And what I mean by that is you can find the wood element in fire, wood in earth, wood in metal, wood in water, right? And these are about the subtypes are about our tendencies when we are off center. So the easiest way to think about a subtype, we have yin and yang, right? So things can be deficient and run down, or they can be in excess and compensating. So I talked a little bit today about water when it's in its deficient mode versus when it's in excess. Now, where this gets complicated, and I'm trying to keep it without watering it down, I'm trying to keep things accessible and helpful. But different things would lead to the water element being run down, like your being kidney yang or kidney yin deficient. And one would be burnout, like adrenal fatigue. Your adrenals sit on top of your kidneys. You're working too hard, you're pushing too hard, you're not sleeping enough. And it's starting to show up as your libido falling off, your sleep getting compromised, low back pain, um, urinary incontinence, listlessness, depression, etc. This is the yang energy starting to deplete in the kidneys, right? So that your willpower is getting compromised and your ability to trust is getting compromised. If it becomes very depleted, it starts to show up as paranoia. It's like as you can't trust anything or anybody, right? In delusional fantasies, that kind of thing. So that's on one end of the spectrum, right? Whereas you could have kidney yin deficiency showing up as false heat in the body, etc. I'm not trying to intentionally confuse you. I'm trying to point out that these things exist on a continuum from totally deficient and totally depleted to pushing too hard. And it's kind of like looking at somebody who's very anxious because they're doing too much versus somebody who's depressed because they don't have any energy to do anything, right? I'm using this as kind of a gross example. So your subtypes show up when you're out of balance and you're starting to fall into a default compensatory element to try to make up for the imbalance, right? Let me give you an example. A person's a water element type, say, and they're starting to feel overwhelmed because their container, right? The water is the container, is leaking. They cannot hold how much they have to do, right? I mean, how many Americans can relate to this? They're trying to do way too many things. They're never fully resting. They're never fully putting it down. And they feel like they have to hold it together all the time. So they might, under stress and duress, start to default into the wood element planning of like, I've got to make a plan. I've got to have a super tight schedule. I got to get up at 5 a.m. and do this from 5 to 5:20 and from 5:20 to 5:30 and from 5:30 to 5:42. And then they start to create a plan to try to create container for the water element getting compromised. And what they actually need is to rest. Because when they rest and they put it all down, then the lake, instead of having waves across the surface, settles and there's clarity and they can see what's going on, right? So that's kind of a weird example. I'm just trying to come up with one off the top of my head. But generally speaking, the subtype is what comes in when we're trying to compensate because we're out of balance. So as you're learning more about each element through the course, start to look at, okay, I think this is my dominant type because this is where what feels comfortable when I'm at rest and I'm happy and balanced. And then when I'm out of balance, how do I respond? And that will start to show you more about your response. And ultimately for this course, this is about really trying to see the elements in ourselves because the more you can kind of see them in yourselves, then you'll start to see them in others. And then you'll start to have more compassion for people because you realize they're just being who they are. You stop expecting them to be a certain way, you know? Hi.
So we have another question. Can your type and subtype be the same?
Um, I have met some people in clinical practice who are so that doesn't happen very frequently unless they're more of the yang types like wood and fire. Because sometimes wood and fire people, they've got one mode. I'm thinking of that like Charlie Sheen interview where he was like starting to spin out and doing a lot of drugs and sleeping with all these prostitutes. And he gets interviewed and he says to the woman, I've only got one speed, go. And he's like, I got Adonis blood running through my veins. I got a Jaguar spirit. Like he just like is so intense. And there are some wood types that they're just wood types. It's the army general, it's the fucking, excuse my language, all systems go, straight ahead, damn the torpedoes, into the storm. Every moment of every day is full throttle rock and roll, right? These people tend to burn out pretty intensely. It can also happen with fire types a lot. I call it the 27 Club, pure creative, expressive energy. They just want to go and create and experience and explode and explore, right? And if it's all systems go all the time, sometimes those yang types, they don't have a default mode. They kind of just have one mode, right? Which is go. They're hard charging people, and so those people oftentimes need grounding. They need more earth energy around them. They oftentimes have a hard time understanding the depth of water element people or relating to it, or the slowness of pace, or the order and the boundaries and the stillness and integrity of more metal element types. So yeah, I mean, I know one person who's like a pretty intensely water element type. He's a writer, an author, and he doesn't seem to default into other modes very much. So one thing I want to say is we all have all five elements, right? And ultimately, we're wanting to cultivate a balance between them. For people who have a lot of metal and water, they want to bring some more vision and directionality and purpose and connection and spark and fire and warmth into their makeup because that warmth can actually soften the metal. Fire can soften the metal if it's a gentle warmth. If it's too hot, it melts it and it's too much. Um, like earth types are always worrying, right? And having a plan, some of that wood element energy, creating a plan and saying, hey, we're going to go this direction and follow these steps, it can alleviate a lot of that worry that earth types have. So really we're wanting to learn kind of sensitivity to how to incorporate the gifts and the virtues and the values of the other elements so we're more well-rounded. And ultimately in Taoism, that's called the path of the Huxian or the Xian, which is a Taoist shaman, which is to work with the elements dynamically and to know how to draw from them when you need the different elements, right? Which is part of understanding healthy relational dynamics also. All right.
All right, since we're a little bit after an hour and a half here. We'll go ahead and close this up. If you have additional questions, please email and we'll respond and get answers to that, and then just be on the lookout for the follow-up.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So great to see some new faces and old faces, and nice to spend some time on a Saturday morning. I hope you got some good tea out there. Also, if you want some more guidance on meditation and starting a tea practice, I mentioned this last class, but I designed these ritual kits and did a whole write-up on them. Those are coming back in stock this week. And also the teas that we're drinking through this course are from the Pu'er Club, and I curate those teas very carefully, and they're really, really nice teas. It's just one pu'er a month. So if you're looking for nice teas to support this practice, the Pu'er Club. And the very last thing is at the end of this month, so in 5 days, 6 days, we're sending out the Seasonal Tea Club. And I did a whole write-up on death and transformation and water into wood element. And it's a pretty deep dive into that exploration. The seasonal tea clubs are designed specifically to more deeply explore the elements every season. So if that sounds nice to you, the 4 teas in this tea club, this one coming out at the end of January, are really, really wonderful teas. So those are some nice ways to continue to the practice on your own at home.